Well, the news said shark bite in Cornwall, and I was like, you mean a shark attack in Cornwall, not a shark bite?
Or maybe someone bit a shark.
Yes, that could be. I've misread the. I've only read the headline.
Yeah.
I've only read the headline.
It's like some crazy person was like, delicious sharks.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
He desperately needs her to survive.
It sort of handled some incredibly delicate topics incredibly well.
I will never watch this again. What was that?
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar.
I'm James Smith.
Let me just go and change my shirt. All right.
Hello and welcome back to Off Radar. My name is James Smith. I am joined by James Eatock.
Hello.
And Neil Brock.
Hello.
Who we call Nige. Today we are talking about The Batman. And I guess for anyone who hasn't listened to us before, this is how it works. One of us has suggested a film for us to watch. In this case, it was myself. Or one of you guys has suggested a film. We've gone away, watched that film. We're going to review it and give you our rating out of 10 at the end. So before we get into this film, I guess Batman in general, you guys fan of the franchise?
Yeah, I would say so. Certainly for me, I think the one thing about Batman is it's kind of that generation where you're first introduced to it that you kind of have that most sort of fondness for. So I remember the Adam West ones being on whatever it was, Channel 4 in the mornings when I was growing up, and then the Michael Keaton ones coming out in the late 80s and sort of early 90s that I was a big fan of. But it's funny actually, because I was thinking before we were going to do this, I've seen all the Batman films, I know them all, I saw all the Christian Bale ones, etc. I'd completely forgotten the Ben Affleck DC Universe fairly recent ones even existed. I'd completely forgot they were there. And there's loads of the animated series as well, which is really highly rated. But yeah, to be honest, as much as I've really enjoyed aspects of Batman, there's so much that I've not seen. It's crazy how big sort of a universe it is.
Yeah, I remember as a kid watching the Adam West ones, and I watched an episode today. I meant to just watch a clip, and I was like, oh man, and I got drawn in and watched a whole Riddler episode, and it's fascinating watching this episode compared to this film in particular. But then obviously I think my first real obviously memory you guys is probably the 89 one and Batman Returns. The Tim Burton ones, obviously Michael Keaton. But even in Batman Returns, right, you got Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, Danny DeVito as Penguin. And then in the Joel Schumacher one, you've got the Riddler, played by Jim Carrey, who we actually spoke about in a previous episode. And then, the Joel Schumacher one, they became a bit more how do you describe it? Kind of almost pantomime-y, kind of cartoonish. And the Batman and Robin, was it?
Which I saw at the cinema. Good old George Clooney stepping into the
Schwarzenegger.
Mr. Freeze.
But I think The Dark Knight was almost a bit of a turning point when I remember seeing that at the IMAX and being kind of blown away, but more so by Heath Ledger's performance. But then, you, when the Affleck ones have totally passed me by, but just we're reading about this one, Affleck signed up originally to direct, produce and star in this film, and then decided he had reservations and dropped out the whole project, which was really interesting. But yeah, Eatock, you're obviously a comic book fan. I know you're into Marvel, but DC, has that been your thing?
As a kid, I remember vaguely picking up a couple of Batman comics, but I was always, like you say, I was more of a Marvel fan. But you both, kind of my entry point was the 1966 Adam West show. I loved that show. I used to be on the Wide Awake Club and then subsequently I think Whack-A-Day. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And like Nige says, I think it was on Channel 4 in later years. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. And then obviously Batman the Animated Series, which was the Paul Dini, Bruce Timm kind of masterpiece, which was jumping on the back of the Tim Burton film, which I saw at the cinema in '89. Absolutely loved it. I just really loved it. And I for me, that was the first time I saw that Dark Knight take on the Dark Knight, because originally, for the longest time, Batman was influenced so much by the live action show. And then I think in the 80s, it kind of Neil Adams took over. It took a darker turn, and then Frank Miller came along. But there still hadn't been that TV show or film that tapped into the Dark Knight detective. And then the Tim Burton film happened. I remember it was just for that, I don't know, summer, Christmas, 1 year at least, Batman was the coolest thing ever next to the Ninja Turtles. And like I say, Batman the Animated Series came along, and it's still to this day one of the best cartoons ever produced. And yeah, it's funny with the I kind of dropped out after Batman Returns. I didn't, obviously for understandable reasons, wasn't a fan of the Schumacher movies. Did like Jim Carrey as the Riddler just because he was channeling the original. Was it Frank Gorshin who played the original Riddler?
Yeah.
So he was channeling that kind of performance, and it worked. You understood it. Didn't really care for Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face, and the last one I just couldn't really ever watch. But the Christian Bale films, something about them just didn't work for me. And I understand that people love them, but I just remember being like, if you were to put all three of those movies, so what was it? Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises, Dark Knight Returns, was that the Heath Ledger
I think
one?
it was just the Dark Knight was...
Sorry, Dark Knight.
Yeah.
And then Dark Knight Rises was the last one, I think. To me, those three films are almost interchangeable. They're almost like...
Yeah.
I know it might offend loads of people, but to me, Lord of the Rings is the same. If you showed me a clip, I'd be like, which one's that from?
Just going to everyone right now. He's just
just
a film.
Yeah,
like Star Wars.
Well, yeah. What about
but
Star Wars?
No. But at least with like Star Wars, you could tell those three. This scene is from that. This scene is from that. Oh, here's some hobbits walking along. They do that in 3 films. Walkie, drop a ring in a bloody volcano. And then with the Batman films, I just remember the first one not feeling anything like Batman. The second one was obviously was the best of the 3. The third one, I just could never get past. I'd seen Bane in the comics, and
I think that definitely spoiled it.
Hello, Batman. It's like, oh, Batman. It's like, what the hell is this? You're Bane, and it's Tom Hardy, who's amazing, but for some reason, it's like, I'm going to play him like a pantomime villain. But yeah, just I kind of checked out after those films. I was like, I'm not really feeling much Batman. Just one little interesting thing, if you've ever been a fan of the old live action show, they did 2 animated movies. I believe both of them had Adam West as Batman again, and they were really good because they played into the original style of the original live action show, but in an animation style, and they're really fun. I think one was called Two-Face because obviously Two-Face was never in the '66 show, but yeah, really, I'd recommend checking those out. Because they evoke that original kind of Adam West camp Batman. But it's in short, Batman's good.
Well, just to jump in very quickly, you're kind of saying the original Batman in the 60s. There was actually a Batman TV show before that, and the only reason I know that is because I used to have Ghostbusters 1 and 2 on like a double VHS box set. And for whatever reason, no, it wasn't a double, it was just a single, but both films were on the same tape. Those were the days. And halfway through, it just randomly showed this Batman episode from like 1940s or 50s black and white Batman. And I was like, what on earth is this? So I know there is another one. I know nothing about it other than it was on that VHS. So there you go.
You got to find the VHS, Nige.
I've still got it. I've got loads of them, like hundreds of VHSs. So if anyone wants to purchase a few, I will sell them for very reasonable rates rather than taking them to the tip.
Moving on to The Batman 2022. So this is a recent film. The first thing that's notable about this film is we've talked about some very big directors that have, done these series. Tim Burton, Joel Schumacher, and then Christopher Nolan.
And Jack Schneider as well. He did some of didn't he do like Batman versus Superman?
Yeah, and the Justice League.
Batman,
which, I guess, as a aside from this sort of individual story. But but this film was directed by Matt Reeves, who, like a lot of people will know who he is, but probably not a household name like Christopher Nolan. So he's done Cloverfield. He did 2 of the ape films, Dawn and War of the Planet of the Apes, which I personally like the Planet of the Apes remakes.
I've never seen them. The last Planet of the Apes movie I saw was the Mark Wahlberg one.
Oh, another Tim Burton film.
Tim Burton, yeah.
I'd say check out, especially the first one. I think it's worth a watch.
But it's James Franco's in it as well. To be honest, like, I'm a huge fan of the original Planet of the Apes, and like Etok, I went and saw the Tim Burton one at the cinema and was like, what have they done?
The Tim Burton one's all pretty awful, yeah.
Well, it's just the one, isn't it? But then, yeah, these are good, but like, I kind of watched the first one and was like, yeah, that's fine, it's decent.
Yeah.
But I've not gone back to any of them since. And Cloverfield, I think, is really good.
I love Cloverfield.
He did the sort of American remake of Let the Right One In,
which is a brilliant. I haven't seen the remake, but the Scandi film is a brilliant horror film, which I'd definitely recommend watching.
But it's surprising, that he got sort of to direct this film, you would say, based on that, like 2 decent Planet of the Apes films, and all of a sudden he's directing something so huge.
A massive undertaking, especially when you look at the cast and the history that we've just said, to have a relatively, I wouldn't say an unknown director, but not of Christopher Nolan or Cameron, or these are the kind of directors that seem to be getting this gig at the moment. So Matt Reeves directed it. He also wrote the screenplay with Peter Craig. And it stars, I will run through these people and I'm sure we'll dive into their roles as we go on. Robert Pattinson, obviously, as Bruce Wayne and Batman, who we discussed in Tenet last, and probably the only time we've discussed him on this podcast. Maybe the last, probably not, if there's going to be another 2 Batman films, which I think there is. Zoe Kravitz, Paul Dano, Jeffrey Wright, John Turturro, Peter Sarsgaard, Andy Serkis, and the one man that you will not know is in this film unless you read the list is Colin Farrell, which
that one caught me really off guard.
Is kind of unbelievable.
Doing like a Robert De Niro impression, kind of, I think, as well. Like, it's very, very peculiar.
But it's weird. It's like, why? I didn't realise it was him until I think afterwards. I just looked on Wikipedia to see the box office, and I scrolled down. I was like, Colin Farrell wasn't in it. And then you look and it's like, why would you get an actor of Colin Farrell's talent and then slap all that crap on him and go, you're the Penguin now?
It is odd, but again, we're kind of getting ahead a bit. But the performance he gives is really good. But you're right, it's kind of it. Yeah, you don't know it's him. Like I wouldn't have had a clue had I not read the cast list, and you're trying to work out by looking at his eyes in certain moments. But I mean, and the film. So, a very brief synopsis for you. So, it's wet.
Before you jump in, Smith, I'm just going to say, like, all Batman films are basically, it's the same thing, isn't it? It's Bruce Wayne, he's rich, Alfred's kicking around, there's some bad guys, he's got to do some stuff related to that. Like, it's either at the coming of age stage, which when he becomes a Batman, or more traditionally, it seems, he has been established as Batman within Gotham City, and something happens. And sort of, without trying to sort of do a very quick synopsis, that's essentially what this film is, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of took the words out of my mouth. It's worth pointing out that it starts, it's wet, it's dark, it's Halloween, and the one thing I wanted to just mention very briefly before we go into it is myself and Etok used to work on a show called Spooks and MI5.
Oh, what a start, Smith.
And the start of this film is Rupert Penry Jones, who played the lead in this show. And I was like, oh, wow, Rupert Penry Jones is in this film. He's in this film for 40 seconds.
Literally, when it started, I was like, Penry Jones is in this. And then I was like, Penry Jones isn't in this.
Basically, there's a masked serial killer calling himself the Riddler. He basically begins murdering a whole host of important, rich, white political men. Like you said, Bruce Wayne is like a reclusive billionaire. He's also Batman. He still calls himself Vengeance in this film. It starts investigating the murders with Commissioner Gordon and the police. And then alongside this, Selena, who is played by Zoe Kravitz, is trying to figure out kind of what happened to her roommate Annika, who's been abducted. She seeks answers and revenge, and then eventually kind of becomes like a very early Catwoman. And they kind of work together with Batman on purpose, but not on purpose. And the film is basically, it's a bit of a kind of film noir, find out who done it, why he done it sort of thing.
It's definitely a detective story, which sort of, as Etox said, a lot more like the cartoon series, following that rather than the Wham Bam Thank You Man that we kind of got used to during the 90s.
And it's undercovering the corruption in the city, and then there's also kind of this little kind of story about the Wayne's family background and what they've got to do with it.
Fear is a tool. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning.
A good starting point for us is Robert Pattinson as Batman. Obviously, taken over the Batman role from, Ben Affleck, which I've not seen, so it's hard for me to judge that. But obviously Christian Bale, who's played this almost kind of slick kind of Bruce Wayne, slightly less scarred and jarred, although he is, and his story is a sad story. It seems like Patterson's role in this is far more scruffy and raw. What were your thoughts when you saw Patterson in the role?
To be honest, like, a lot of people are big fans of Robert Pattinson. Like, he's obviously got this huge following from Twilight, etc. I'd only ever seen him in, I think, one other film, ever. So my exposure to him is more through like your terrible celebrity magazines and like, oh, he's so brooding and stuff like that. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind, but kind of went in with a little bit of a clean slate. Like, I don't really recognise him from anything else. So for me, it's almost like casting a character actor, which is probably different to pretty much everybody else's experience in watching this film. So yeah, but I was surprised because, as I said, his reputation is a bit more, at least originally, was a bit more sort of fan fiction-y type nonsense. And then he's kind of tried to go a bit more indie. And then obviously he's come back and done Tenet. And of course, there's two huge films. So he's had a really sort of unusual career arc, I would say.
I'd never seen the Twilight films, unsurprised. I wasn't the target audience, surprisingly. And I'd see, like, I think if we went back and listened to our very interesting Tenet review, I think I said was one of the best things about it. I really enjoyed him in the film. In this film, I really like his Batman. I mean, for once, he's not going, that's Christian Bale as Batman.
Yeah. Albeit he did, didn't he? Apparently, when he first started performing the role, he had like a ridiculous voice, and after a few days filming, they just had to pull him aside and say, please stop doing that voice. It's ridiculous.
No, I love his voice in this. It's like,
but that's because he went back to a normal-ish one.
Thursday, October 31st. The city streets are crowded for the holiday. Even with the rain. Hidden in the chaos is the element, waiting to strike like snakes.
The argument is always, when they're writing Batman, is that Batman is the real person and Bruce Wayne is the disguise, as in Bruce Wayne is the act, as it were. I'm the rich billionaire who's quite happy and, look at me at this function giving money to charity. That's Absolutely. What all great Bruce Waynes or actors that have played him have done. Kevin Conroy in the animated show did a fantastic job of playing Bruce Wayne as like, hi, and da-da-da-da. And then when he's Batman, that's the real character. There's no silly voice. It's just, that's the real character. The problem I have with Patterson's Bruce Wayne is that I feel that his Bruce Wayne is more brooding than Batman, which is really weird when you think about it. Yeah. You see, like, his Batman is, and one of the things I absolutely loved about this film was we see Batman in daylight. Oh my God, like a director finally says, maybe we should just have him in normal light, as opposed to every other director before who's like, no, it must be pitch black.
This is a powder keg, and Ritter's the match.
I can take care of myself.
If this continues, it won't be long before you've nothing left.
I don't care what happens to me.
The first thing I kind of thought when I was watching this film is Bruce Wayne is kind of barely in it. Like the first hour of this film, like you've got a little bit of Bruce Wayne, but mostly it is the Batman.
Batman's in it in the first 10 minutes. Like, how rare is that for a Batman? Like, 10 minutes in, it's the new Batman. The Christian Bale one, wasn't it like the first film? He turns up 5 minutes from the end and goes,
yeah.
Like, oh, great.
No,
okay,
it's
cool.
definitely flipped in this film. I'd say, like 70-80% of the film is he is the Batman. The thing that did annoy me in the first kind of part of that film was they just whisper so much, and I just wanted them to kind of talk at like a normal level. It's just like everybody's whispering in this film. It's like if it's raining and dark, it's so bleak, like Gotham is so bleak. It's like it really needs kind of tidying up.
I would argue that this is one of the most realistic Gothams, though, because or at least in the sense of it's the best interpretation or best version of Gotham I've ever seen, because the Adam West show was what it was. Yeah. The Christopher Nolan Batman was just, I think they just filmed it in New York. It was just so boring. It was just like, it's just another city. This one, like I said, I like the fact that the film is shown in the day, the night, but you get those elements where, that's kind of like Piccadilly Circus, stroke Times Square, stroke Trafalgar Square. There's lots of like mashups. Yeah. Gotham is always supposed to be somewhat bleak, but I feel that this is probably almost like the least bleak and the most interesting it's ever been.
Yeah, well, it starts off with him like almost just kind of solving like petty crime, almost like he just like kind of beats up like people like a pickpocket and stuff like that, rather than going straight into the serial killer. And you can see that kind of happening alongside. I mean, I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing that it's bleak, but it is. It's like it's painted as this very dystopian world that he's in, and because of his past and what he's kind of been through, I feel like the light in this film is so little as Bruce Wayne or the Batman.
Well, just going back to like Bruce Wayne and how he was kind of envisaged by the director, as we mentioned, wrote this. He kind of saw him as, rather than kind of being this like millionaire playboy, as like a kind of like a reluctant rock star, I guess. And you'll notice that there's like a Nirvana, Something in the Way plays a couple of times during the film at the start and the end. Yeah, well, he kind of almost modelled Bruce Wayne's character on Kurt Cobain in the sense of like he was this sort of reluctant star, essentially. Like the fame was too much to him and he didn't really want it. Obviously with Cobain, as we know, suicide and everything that happened there, but with sort of Bruce Wayne, he becomes withdrawn and obviously lashes out through this kind of vengeance Batman side to him. But his kind of the way in which he's almost like, I wouldn't go as far to say like a sulky teenager, but certainly his relationship with Alfred. And Alfred kind of says at one point, like, I think you're insane almost, like that kind of sort of unwillingness to engage with anyone as Bruce Wayne, rather than like the Michael Keaton, as you say, when he was going to all these like fancy ballrooms and dancing with Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, all that kind of stuff that's so memorable. He's so anti that, and it's really interesting that the director sort of not only sort of took that approach, but decided to have the soundtrack kind of accompanying that and have that kind of the slow, methodic sound of the intro, really. So it was a very interesting take for Bruce Wayne, I would say.
Well, as we're talking about music there, I think for me one of the best things in this film is the score. I thought the scoring overall was kind of incredible, and the composer, who I haven't got his name in front of me, has done is kind of worked on 2 to 3 bars, like almost like Superman or Jaws. He's kind of like, he's given him a theme tune, but it's not like comic, and it's not like over the top, but he plays with those notes over and over again over the film. And in my opinion, I think this was one of the most exciting things about this film for me. And I was really enjoyed the music overall, and the Nirvana track was kind of bizarre because it comes out of nowhere, and I was like, man, that track is the only full song in the film, and like you said, twice in amongst a very, very minimalist score with those 2 or 3 notes elsewhere.
I didn't know what to expect, but this feels, it's weird. The best way I can put it is it made Batman feel new for me again, and I I just thought to myself, I want to see where this goes next. You know, I mean, I think, you know, if I was to offer my biggest criticism of this movie, I think would be maybe just edit a little bit. Like, you know, it wasn't the Zack Snyder offensive slow-mo, because there was none of that in this film. That awful slow-mo that Zack Snyder puts in his film that literally expands his movies by about half hour. This was just so much content. I still didn't feel it dragged, but there were certain moments where when you look back, you're like, oh, you could have totally chopped off about 30 seconds here, or even that scene was probably quite unnecessary. It just felt this movie was really trying to explain everything. Paul Dano, when I didn't know he was the Riddler. I didn't know anything. So when the reveal happens from the back, I was like, you can't mistake him really in that voice. And you see him in the diner from the back, and I was like, is that Paul Dano? And then they kind of, I think they pin his head to the counter top, and he turns and smiles at Batman. I was like, Paul Dano, fantastic bit of casting. If you want that kind of unsettling, crazy person, perfect for the role. I loved him in it. I don't care another little bit of criticism for the movie. I don't care too much when they go, oh, we've got this established villain, let's turn him into the guy from Seven or Jigsaw from what were the movies called? Saw movies. Yeah. It's just, I could have done without that, but loved his casting in it.
Yeah, they did. I think the first, on the Paul Dano character, the Riddler, it did feel like Seven or Zodiac or something for the first hour or so of this film. It kind of felt like this film had almost three kind of acts. It had the kind of detective part, almost the Batman part with him and Catwoman and all of that, and then it had then it kind of shifts into this kind of disaster movie at the end.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Which kind of took me by surprise a little bit.
When Falcone dies in kind of Batman's arms kind of thing, and you're like, oh, that's the ending of the film, and you look and there's still another 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's the Riddler plot to wrap up, but that's so beautifully put, Smith, the fact that the last act is like a disaster movie, and that, to me, that really was the weakest part of the film. So what is this plan? He's going to flood the city, and then he does, but everybody's okay.
It's like, oh, my shoes are wet. Oh no. It's just a bit of an anticlimax. And I really loved the detective bit, that first hour. In fact, all right, it might have been ripping off Seven or Zodiac Killer or whatever a little bit. And the director, again, he said it was kind of inspired. A lot of the story was inspired by the Zodiac killings of the 60s. So there's kind of that mentality to it. But I really enjoyed that kind of, let's put some clues together. And I fear for this franchise, which it probably will become, that they can't really do that again. You need the Riddler to have that. You can't. It's like if it's the Joker, it's not like, oh, here's some clues. It's like the Joker is big, he's brash, he's going to do crazy things, and anyone else they kind of bring into it. But for the three acts that you've kind of just said there, I really enjoyed that, the detective side, more than any other aspect of the film. And I think the Batman side, and we haven't talked about her yet, but Catwoman Zoe Kravitz, who is another actor, I should say, who I really respect, really enjoy. I think she was a bit of a weak link in this, in the sense of it was just her kind of character, and the fact, sort of spoiler, she's she's related to the big crime boss. It was all just a bit ridiculous and a bit let's just throw together a woman's part, chuck her in, she's sort of a love interest. And it's just and especially when compared to Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, it's that was incredible. And it's
I didn't necessarily mind. I mean, I think she did a good job, and I didn't mind I didn't mind her in that role, but I think you're right. I think they've tried to get so much into this film. You both clearly really like the detective part. I found it dragged at times, the detective part of this film. And actually, I was I already knew it was Paul Dano. So for me, I was I wasn't really surprised at what they were finding out. So, it wasn't there was a twist or anything like that. So it's basically him finding the Riddler.
But I'd argue that process is done really well. I especially like that this film was the first time I felt that they'd done the relationship between Batman and the cops really well. Because I get so sick and tired of these kind of movies, like a Batman movie or a whatever movie with a superhero or a vigilante of justice, where the cops are like, "We'll get you next time, Batman," and Batman's like, "But I just saved the day," or whatever.
Yeah.
But this was like, they had that fraught relationship, but there was, and I thought, I forget his name, he played Commissioner Gordon.
Jeffrey Wright.
Jeffrey Wright.
He's brilliant.
He's fantastic in it, and I love his relationship with Batman and the fact that he was obviously Batman's kind of entry point into every scene.
Yeah.
But the fraught relationship, one of my favourite scenes is when, Batman, the bomb's exploded and he wakes up and they're about to take off his mask and there's all these coppers around him and he's in like almost like a holding cell.
Yeah.
And they're just all, it's such a great looking scene. It's beautifully shot, and Jeffrey Wright, like Commissioner Gordon's got him up against the fence going like, "Chill out, man," like, calm. He doesn't say chill out, man, but he's like, calm down. He's just like trying to get, Batman to, anything you do right now is going to be perceived as an act of aggression, so bring it down a little. And all the other coppers are like really angry. I thought it was like fantastically done, and I really enjoyed. Again, we go back to the detective thing. It just felt like there was a real effort to make, because Batman is, that was always the thing in the comics going far back. He was known as the world's greatest detective. So how about we have him solve some stuff?
I think it was more for me that because Paul Dano is so much more interesting when he was unmasked and the dynamic between them. The fact that it took 2.5 hours for me to find out, it was him. I just found that kind of a bit laboured and frustrating and slow. But
okay, based on that, I'm going to come at you, Smith, with some moves.
Yeah.
What's your take on 7 then? Because we don't get the reveal of Kevin Spacey's character until 20 minutes from the end, and up until that point, I'd argue that it's a fantastic film, and it is equally as fantastic when he's unmasked. If Kevin Spacey was going around going, "Ooh, I've just like tied this fat man to a chair and made him eat," it would just be like, "Oh, I don't want to see that."
No, I mean, it works in that film, and I love that film, but I don't know if it does in this film. That's
okay.
I thought it was like Henry Rollins for quite a lot of the film. I was like, "Who is that? Is that Henry Rollins?" And it's
Henry Rollins.
Oh, it's Paul Dano. Okay, but yeah, like I think I see what you're saying, and I think if I'd have gone into it with my eyes a bit more open, if I'd done a bit of research, maybe I wouldn't have enjoyed it so much. So I totally get where you're coming from.
And then, so we got Paul Dano, then, I mean, we got a load of other people, but you mentioned Alfred, Andy Serkis, who obviously teamed up with Matt Reeves in the Apes films, and, that's all I really kind of remember him as playing Caesar, as this ape. So to see him as this, sweet.
Was that your ape impression?
That was my ape impression.
You damn.
I honestly, for a second, Smith, I was looking at the Zoom call and there was an ape there instead of you. I was like, what happens to Smith?
Ape talk.
Ape talk. There's your next podcast. Ape talk.
Ape talk. You interview a bunch of chimpanzees about their new series, Quantum Chimp.
Quantum Chimp.
Quantum Chimp.
Quantum Chimp. But yeah, he plays this sweet old kind of father figure, and
he plays Alfred. Like, Alfred has never changed really that much across any of the Batman
It's true,
films.
but he's not in this film very much, is he? Alfred, and I feel like he's really good in that role.
It was surprising because I didn't know he was Alfred.
Yeah,
likewise. I was like, isn't he a bit young to be Alfred?
Yes.
Yeah, I just expect him. Again, I've got that kind of Michael Keaton one in my head. Like, I can't remember the actor's name in those films, but he was a tall, thin, very posh actor. I think Andy Serkis's Alfred's like an ex-Marine or he's an ex-army kind of guy, isn't he, in this film?
Which I think is like a more modern take on Alfred, because I think they always had Alfred as, he was, ex something, even as far back as the old show is. They had the idea in the comics that I think he used to be so, but I think in the last maybe 10, 15 years, they've said, oh no, he was ex like SAS or something. He's,
that makes sense.
Ex-military. So, that's how he's able to have these great strategies and stuff like that, rather than being like, another cup of tea, Master Bruce, any of that. Shut up, Alfred. I gotta fight the Joker.
Well, I think one of my favourite scenes in the film actually is when the Riddler sends the Batman like a package, and Alfred intercepts it, and you're like,
that's really well done.
Is he going to open it up? And Alfred's not going to die, but for a second when you see the bomb go off, you're like, wow. And obviously he's in hospital, and he's okay, but I thought it was a well done scene, and it actually genuinely had me kind of like really feeling some emotion.
Hello?
Gory! I need to speak to Alfred.
Oh, Mr. Wayne.
Listen to me. Something terrible is going to happen.
I'm afraid it already has, sir.
I hated that scene.
Did you?
I hated it because I thought it was so ridiculous. Like, he'd gone to all these great lengths to kind of capture these people and put all these torturous things. And then for Bruce Wayne, he's like, I'm just going to send a bomb in the post. I can't be asked to do anything bigger than that. It's like, wait a minute. You've like gone round to a guy's house, chopped off his thumb. You've like made a rat like eat someone's face off. And you're like, oh, just shoot something in the post, get Royal Mail to deliver it. Yeah, it's fine. It was just like, it was so weird.
I didn't really think about the kind of that side of it, but the more, I guess, the actual emotional connection in that hospital where you're like,
it's a well acted scene, all that kind of stuff, but it just for a plot
which I think the film
like,
is lacking, in other parts.
We got to talk about the Penguin though, who I thought was probably one of the best characters in it. It was so fantastically, original, unique, and this felt like a really original but also genuine take as this kind of gangster. But I really liked him in the role. I mean, like I said, I didn't even know it was Colin Farrell, but just something about, again, someone on screen, much like Zoe Kravitz, when they're on screen they kind of command presence, even though they're not even in the film that much.
But they've made all of the characters in this film, including the villains, including Batman and even Catwoman, they've made them more human, haven't they? They've made them more real, whereas in previous films, like, I mean, obviously the Tim Burton one, with the Penguin, Danny DeVito in that, with the long nose and it's all over the top, exaggerated. In this, like, they're gangsters, and even the Catwoman she's not quite Catwoman, but she is, like...
She's like wearing a balaclava.
I did think that was a cop out, though. I did think that was a bit of a cop out. It's like, I did like, was it in the Christopher Nolan one when they had Anne Hathaway was Catwoman, or Selena Kyle?
Yeah.
And I think she had something where it was almost like a pair of glasses that when she lifted it up, it looked like cat ears. That's the way they got around that. But it just felt like the balaclava didn't match. She'd gone to the trouble of this like very classy, awesome leather kind of like, obviously racing togs or something, motorcycle togs. But then she just had like a balaclava and it just didn't look right. It was like a weird mix.
She had like really long nails as well, which is supposed to be like cat's claws. It's like, because she owns a few cats and she's got long nails. Yeah, she's Catwoman. It's fine. It's just a bit like...
and that was it.
But
they didn't have the cats licking her like in Michelle Pfeiffer and...
No, and I missed that fantasy side of it.
I was going to say, that origin story is atrocious, but I mean... It's so difficult because obviously every kind of role is compared to the last, and you cannot compare, Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman to Zoe Kravitz's. But
I can.
I was going to say, but that Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman is
badly
iconic.
It is.
It's just such a great, like, fantastic. It's the best thing of that movie. Easily,
and I'll tell you what else I hated. Like, straight away, Batman knew she was like doing this kind of thing. It's not like going back to the sort of Batman Returns, it's like, he figures it out eventually. There's that amazing scene where they're dancing in the ballroom and they both look up and see the kid, they say like the line and realise that Bruce Wayne is Batman and Selena Kyle is Catwoman. In this film, it's like, I follow her home, she jumps on a motorbike, she's up to some crazy shit and she can do kung fu, right? Yeah, all right, she's Catwoman. And it's like, you kind of lose that element of mystery or building their relationship, and it makes it a very one-sided relationship. And again, like, Zoe Kravitz, great actress, she does really well with what she's got. I just don't think there's that much to the character and to how she's scripted, really. I just think as I said, it was a real weak point for me. And going on to sort of Penguin, I totally get what you're saying about it being more realistic and trying to like create real characters rather than that fantasy element. But it could have just been any gangster. There was no real like, it's Penguin. It's like, we call him Penguin because I don't even know why they called him Penguin. Like, it was just like, it could have been anyone.
There was one good payoff to that gag though, where Batman binds him by the feet.
And he waddles.
Come back, and he waddles, and that did make me laugh. I was like, haha, I did like that.
And that was after one of the sort of kind of the best of the Batman scenes, if we're talking about as a 3-act film, like that car chase. Like, I thought that was amazing.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe knows what it is, but honestly, at this point, it's tired. They've run out of, like, the film was called Endgame for a reason, because it was like, that's the end. That's where you should have ended it. But obviously, how do you stop after you've made a film's made $2 billion? Money. Yeah, it's like, well, we're going to do Disney Plus, we're going to do all these shows, we're going to do your movies every few months, and it's become bloated. And I think the antidote for that is this movie. But the problem is, as the most casual of comic book fans, you always want to see characters crossing over and stuff. This Batman can exist in the same universe as the Joaquin Phoenix. This Batman could exist without Joker feasibly, but obviously they've already established that the Joker in this universe is different from that one, which is different from Jared Leto's Joker in the other. I mean,
it's
that's
just too much.
It's a mess. Their whole universe is a mess, and it's such a shame but at the same time, I think it's a blessing in disguise, because how do you have this film, this universe, this mood and tone that we've seen in this movie, and then Superman shows up? That does not work. You cannot do that in this. I don't think you can. I think it would be so jarring if you had the Superman. You can do that in certain movies, and I think Zack Snyder kind of made it work. But if you suddenly have Superman show up in this universe, I think it would be just like, what?
Yeah.
This doesn't
very
work.
Fair point. Yeah.
This universe is kind of grounded in this semi-reality.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Well, Batman as a character, he doesn't have superpowers. He's probably one of the realest of superheroes. He is human.
Nige, what's wrong?
I was just going to say, like, for loads of the film, especially the bit at the end, again, like the my feet are getting wet set piece, it's like, just shoot him in the fucking face. Please just shoot him in the face. Look, there's that big bit of face that isn't covered by a mask or armour. Shoot him in the goddamn face.
I did think that a few times in this movie. That's frustrating. I did think that. I was like, why are they not just shooting him in the face?
Even though I say that, but he still does feel invincible, which is always my problem with any. I know you're a superhero movie fan, but it's always my problem after that first hour, generally speaking, in a superhero film, where we get into the kind of baddie versus goodie bit. You just know how it's going to end, and I never feel that kind of, he's not going to get hurt. And it's like one of our beefs with John Wick, for example, which we reviewed in an earlier podcast. And at times, this film felt like that, in the sense of, okay, now he's just going to fight a load of guys in masked things on top of it.
That was another thing. Like, he passes out twice in this film. It's like, that's a very rare thing for Batman to be that vulnerable. And both times it's like, just take off his mask. He's out cold. And it's like, no, he's all right in the police station. And it's like, oh, he's going to pump himself with green jello and kick ass and whatever. And it's just, there's a few bits, I wouldn't go as far as to call them plot holes, but just bits where I was like, really? And it kind of took me out of it. Well, I've got two little bits of trivia. The first one is our good friend Colin Farrell as the Penguin. Well, it could have been Jonah Hill instead. He got offered the role, but actually he was desperate to get the Riddler role, which they didn't feel he was right for. Hill. So it could have been Jonah Hill.
That would have been a different performance.
Oh, it would have been a completely different film, I think, in some respects. But the big bit of trivia is that both Zoe Kravitz, a.k.a. Catwoman, and, of course, Robert Pattinson, a.k.a. Batman, went to people who had played the role previously. So Zoe Kravitz went to Michelle Pfeiffer, and Pattinson went to Christian Bale to ask their advice about playing the role. And bizarrely, both gave exactly the same bit of advice. And that was, make sure you can go to the toilet whilst in costume. So that was their one bit of advice. Forget about all the acting, forget about the style, just make sure you can do a wee and a number two.
Oh, that's good.
That's a good bit of trivia and advice.
Why, thank you.
Always know that.
Yeah.
Just
See, this is what we're here to do.
Yeah.
Go, general advice for everyone. If you can't go, oh no.
So before we get into our ratings and kind of like what we overall think, I actually went on Twitter and I did a Twitter poll of this film.
Smith did a poll?
Oh man, we're getting interactive.
And I thought there wouldn't be any votes, but we actually had 43 votes, which was quite a lot.
That's a lot, Smith.
I imagine a lot of them are Batman fans using
it was all my bot accounts.
The Batman hashtag and DC Comics. So percentage-wise, this is what I did. So these are the categories I gave it. Nearly turned it off. It's all right. Good movie or amazing movie. So with 39.5% people gave it amazing movie, with 20.9% good movie, with 23.3% it's all right, and 16.3% nearly turned it off. So really interesting. Quite
that's not as kind of
definitive as you would think.
Especially in this day and age, when it's either I love it or I hate it.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of, stark contrast you get these days. But that's really interesting. There's quite a, I don't know what that is, but that's what it is.
Etok, I'm going to come to you first. What did you think, and what was your rating of this, The Batman?
I went in thinking I would absolutely hate this, just because I just hadn't really enjoyed the Batman cinematic outing probably since Burton's, to be honest. Like I said, I did have a bit of love for Ben Affleck, but he was in some real dog shit movies. But yeah, I found myself being pleasantly surprised by this movie. I thought it was a fresh take on it. Wasn't so keen on Bruce Wayne. Kind of liked everything else about it. Liked the fact that they had Batman within the first 10 minutes. Yeah, for me, I came out thinking I'd like to see where this goes. So I'm actually going to give it a 7 out of 10.
Solid 7.
Solid 7. 7 out of 10. So yeah, again, I mean, I went into this film not really knowing what to expect. Again, like, I'm not a massive Batman fan, but I appreciate like a bit of all of those, especially the Burton ones. I appreciated The Dark Knight at the time, seeing it at the IMAX. I haven't really watched it since, so that does say something. But like this film, I don't know. For me, like, I appreciated what you guys are saying about the kind of detective story and that part of it. But it's I found that kind of dragged at times. I felt like I had little emotional connection with any of the characters in this film. The one I had most was probably Alfred, and he was barely in it. I kind of disagree. Like, although Batman is in it a lot and that's interesting, I wanted more Bruce Wayne. I wanted to find out a bit more about him, and I know we know everything about him, and I know that is the problem when you're making this film over and over again. It's like, okay, his parents dead, what more can we say? And that's kind of what they did with this film, and I felt like maybe in the second one there's going to be more of that, but I do feel like a new scriptwriter kind of needs to look at this character and give it something new, because I still felt like I was watching a very similar story again. It was still like Batman, he's a sad old bloke, he's depressed, he's an insomniac.
Sad old bloke.
He's good.
He's down the bookies, he's like, come on.
He's unliked by most of the public and the police, but, like, I don't think there was enough new for me to love this film, I guess is what I'm saying. There were maybe 3 or 4 scenes that I really enjoyed, but overall I felt it was too long. If it was 2 hours, I probably would have enjoyed it more. I kind of, again, I disagreed with you, Nige, on the kind of Paul Dano thing. I felt like I just wanted him out the mask. I wanted to know more about him, because he's such a good actor, and I found his character so much more interesting where they're having that standoff in the jail and stuff. So when it was just this faceless terrorist, I was just a bit bored by that. Although I don't mind a detective film, so I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure why. So yeah, it's a bit of a disappointing, and I'm going to go with what I wrote down after the film. 4.5 from me.
Wow, bloody hell!
I didn't think it'd be that long.
No, I didn't at all. I am
4.5
extremely
Smith.
shocked. He's done an Etok and Nige twist.
I did a Nige twist.
That's fair enough, Smith.
I couldn't watch this film again. But weirdly, I'm kind of in.
Just don't tag Matt Reeves in the.
Yeah, no, I
post when
won't
you
on that
post
one.
this eventually.
only when you guys,
Fuck right off, mate.
only when you guys give it a bad review, I do that.
Wow.
It was my friends, not me.
I suppose I've got a big act to follow there. So yeah, for me, we've kind of touched upon most of the main points, and the fact it's a 3-act film, well, a 3-layered film, I would say, and I really enjoyed the detective side. Was a bit meh about the Batman side, although there's some very high points in there, and the ending, wet shoes. So big shout out to my boy John Turturro, who we've not actually mentioned very much during this, who puts in a solid performance and also plays a bit of Paul, like his character in The Colour of Money, so I love that bit as well. But yeah, a few too many kind of like plot holes for me, a few too many just like No, I say a few too many. I guess the overriding point for me is just why? Why do another Batman film? I've said the same things about Spider-Man films, about Superman films. Why do they keep doing it? I appreciate their like amazing bits of sort of American literature and art that they just want to squeeze the most out of. But for me, I just didn't think there was space for another Batman film in kind of this oversaturated market. And they've done it. And as I said, there's some real high points. Robert Pattinson, great. The cast in general is really strong. Yeah,
I agree.
So I think for me, because the quality of the film, it's really well directed. It looks amazing. Cinematography. The script is okay at points. Like I quite like the Riddler character. I like that detective side. So for me, just because those bits are so strong, it makes up for a lot of the other failings. So like ETOC, I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. And I think, again, the length as well hurt it. I think if it was slightly shorter, that might have even been an 8 from me. But it's one of those like weird ones where I wouldn't necessarily say I would go back and watch it again, but I could see a very quality film on the screen when I sat down to watch it. So for that reason, like 7 out of 10. But do I want to go and watch the sequel or the TV spin-off that they're likely going to make from this? No, probably not. But it's fine as a one-off.
Nice. Nicely said. Yeah, and guys, what do you think? Do you like Batman? Get in touch. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. Tweet us at offradarpodcast. Let us know what you think about The Batman. Do you agree with me? Is it a 4.5? Or with these guys, is it a 7? Or maybe you think it's amazing.
Some people do. They voted in the poll and they were like, it's amazing.
Yeah, but they were called Cape Crusader and the Batman Crime Solver.
I think...
I'm making it up, but...
Oh, that's so good, Seth. I love that.
And Robert Pattinson, 69.
Yeah.